How's it going, guys? Cracked Rack here, and before I get into this fucking behemoth of a video, I just want to say that I spent weeks on this video, researching, reviewing, and ranking every single Rockstar game known to man. Rockstar Games is one of the most popular and beloved game development companies in the world. You could approach anyone here in the United States, and they would know what Rockstar Games was. They've been developing games since the early 90s, and with that, they've released a lot of f***ing amazing games, but they've also released quite a few stinkers. But we'll get to that. Anyway, this is every Rockstar game ranked from best to worst. Keep in mind, this is all my opinion, and I will also not be talking about these games, as I have not played them, and I'm not going to talk about games I haven't played. This game just had the best everything. The best graphics, the best atmosphere, the best story, the best physics. Well, I mean, these days the graphics for it aren't as amazing as they were, but with a few minor tweaks on the PC version, you will be blown away at how good this game still looks. I don't need to explain much about this because I'm sure you already know almost all about it. It was truly the magnum opus of Rockstar Games, and I feel this game is honestly a little undercut by other reviewers. It gets a bad rap for having a few negative features, but all around, it's a solid masterpiece of a video game that I recommend everyone play at least once in their lives. I don't think I need to explain why Grand Theft Auto 5 is the second best Rockstar game out there. It's got a beautiful and extremely engaging and memorable story paired alongside groundbreaking gameplay that truly showcased the technological capabilities of our consoles at the time. Max Payne 3 is, in my opinion, one of the best linear third-person shooter games of all time. I have never had more fun utilizing in-game combat mechanics before as I have with Max Payne 3. See, Max Payne 3 has an amazing gore system that leaves very visible entry and exit wounds on everyone you shoot, and it just looks so awesome and makes the combat so badass and rewarding. The story of this game was also super memorable and tear-jerking at some points, and I heavily recommend this game to anyone who can play it. This game is the magnum opus of the PlayStation 3 in my opinion. The exploration was vast but not boring and a chore to ride through like in Red Dead 2. It was a simple game with an amazing gore system, an awesome story, and a really cool and heavily underrated multiplayer mode, which I was addicted to in the 2010s. Seriously, I think I have over 1,000 hours clocked in on the multiplayer alone. Go play this game if you haven't. Oh boy, I have so much to get through. Anyway, this game really makes me hope that Rockstar is planning on doing a full-on zombie video game sometime in the future, because they have proven with Undead Nightmare that they are well capable of it. I don't have much to say about this one that's very insightful, because I didn't really play it that hardcore, other than its main story, but it's everything good about Red Dead Redemption 1, but with a far more interesting story and the endlessly fun feature of zombies. I heavily recommend this title, and I only rank it under Red Dead Redemption 1, because I kind of feel like that would be undercutting the greatness of the original game. I was reluctant on where to put episodes from Liberty City on this list, but I honestly feel it deserves high praise regardless of what some critics may think. Episodes from Liberty City is two short but very fun and engaging stories regarding two very kind gentlemen citizens of Liberty City, Luis Lopez and Johnny Klebitz. This is an amazing expansion of Grand Theft Auto 4 that truly delivered an enjoyable and memorable experience, though it's not much different at its core from GTA 4 in terms of gameplay. It just revises a few things and adds more playful mechanics that make the game less of a chore to play. Yes, Red Dead Redemption 2 is beautiful, and I couldn't recommend it enough, eye-roll. But it's not that high on my list here because I just really didn't care for this one as much as other titles from Rockstar and feel it was heavily overhyped. Once the shock and awe of the pretty graphics and huge world wear off, and trust me, they wear off very quickly, this game kind of felt like a chore to play. I did not enjoy beating it as much as others, and in fact, after a while, it kind of felt like I was slaving away to complete the game. This is really just a case, in my opinion, of a game with too much to offer. It took me over 100 hours just to beat the basic main story. Overall, I don't think Red Dead Redemption 2 deserves to be seen as one of Rockstar's best games, as people like to suggest, because it's just not. It's an overwhelming task to play Red Dead 2, and while it is a fantastic game that I heavily recommend, it's not in my personal favorites list. LA Noire VR is one of the dopest experimental games I have played in a long time, and I was extremely surprised at its quality. I don't really like the original LA Noire, I think it's an underwhelming Rockstar experience, but LA Noire VR is a really fun short campaign revolving around LA Noire's timeline, and the whole thing is manually interactive by means of virtual reality, and it's fucking awesome. You get to manually drive around, the gunfights are fun, and the story is campy and interesting. I honestly hope Rockstar keeps making cool VR experiences like this because I am a fan, and I heavily recommend you try this out. I love Manhunt, and it's really a good case of less being more, as Manhunt is a pretty graphically bare-bones and simple arcade-ish game, yet it's so rich in gameplay and challenge that I just couldn't not include it at a decent spot in this list. You're a man named James Earl Cash who goes to death row, but you get kidnapped by a snuff filmmaker and you're plopped into stages full of a dozen or so enemies, and you have to use the shade of your environment to sneak around and brutally murder everyone. It is a fun experience that engaged me from start to finish. It's also a genuinely terrifying game. Even all these years later, it's only gotten more unnerving as time has gone on. Especially that motherfucker Pigsy. Oh, that guy, whew. I couldn't recommend this game enough. I played Bully Scholarship Edition on the Wii, and it was a pretty good experience that really actually pushed the boundaries of the Wii, because the Wii is not very graphically capable. I definitely say this is one of the best Wii games, and I prefer that console specifically because I just feel like the game was best optimized for the Wii. If you don't know what Bully is, to sum it up really quickly, it's essentially like Grand Theft Auto, but instead of serious adult shit and murder, you play as a 15-year-old douchebag and beat the shit out of kids and ride your bike around and go to class and fuck around, pretty much. The story of this game is really fun, and I, to this day, am blown away at just how immersive and atmospheric this game was, especially for its time. I just beat it again, like 2 weeks ago, and I heavily recommend it. LA Noire was really a mixed bag for me. I don't think it's a bad game by any means, but its gameplay was mediocre at best, and its combat system was really unimpressive and uninteresting, even though it makes up a pretty large bulk of the game. I also really didn't care for the way overly hyped facial expression feature where you read people's facial expressions and decide if they're lying or not, mainly because it's such a controlled feature and there's not really a lot of experimentation you can do with it that the game doesn't try to hold your hand for. It's just not a great game to me, though I will say it did have some pretty interesting, challenging, and thought-provoking missions. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is all around a solid experience, and for many a near-religious experience, as it's one of the most beloved nostalgic games I can even think of, but I don't really judge games through the lens of nostalgia. I'm just gonna judge this game like I judge any other game. It's a good game, but it's not anything I'd really recommend in 2020. I find its physics system to be really clunky and unfun, and graphically this game is vomit salad. Its story and atmosphere are just good enough to keep you invested, and its missions are actually really fun and memorable, but honestly, every time I play this game, I just wish I was playing GTA 5. I recommend this game if you really like GTA or just haven't even played this one before, but otherwise, I'd recommend just moving on to something else. Vice City is a good game and all, but it's not anything to write home about in 2020. I know I keep saying that, but I'm just judging these games as games, and nostalgia and brand loyalty aside, while this game is very entertaining and it has a pretty cool atmosphere, it's really clunky and outdated, and its story is uninteresting. I mean, what all are you gonna learn about a character that says all of like 20 sentences throughout the entire game? Grand Theft Auto Liberty City stories and Grand Theft Auto Vice City stories are really uninteresting to me. I know a lot of people really liked these ones, but I found them so lackluster and unengaging. Liberty City Stories is kind of like an expansion of San Andreas. It originally came out on the PS2, but was ported to the PSP. I say it's kind of like an expansion because it runs on practically the same engine as San Andreas, and even shares a lot of the same iconography, but it's just an uninteresting mess. The story is weak, the game is very ugly, the atmosphere is very poor and forced, there's very little immersion to be had. At times, it really legitimately just feels like a bare-bones husk of San Andreas. The PSP port of these games are also very choppy and way uglier than the PS2 version. Vice City Stories is a little bit better than Liberty City Stories because it has more depth and a far more interesting protagonist, and it's a little more bubbly and playful in its gameplay, but not by much. I really couldn't think of any reason to go and specifically play this game out of all the other games you have to choose from. Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars was the most hyped video game of 2009, and to me, it was also the most disappointing of 2009. It left so much to be desired. Am I saying it's bad? No, but it's definitely one of the weaker GTA titles, and you definitely are missing nothing by skipping it. It's really cool to see a fully functional AAA Grand Theft Auto experience ported to something as small as the DS, but once you get over that, you'll find a pretty lackluster experience that doesn't really get better the more you play it. A lot of great ideas here, but just lackluster execution. Like the drug dealing system, that had a lot of potential, but I just didn't really find myself having too much fun with it. This also released a year after GTA 4, which was just really bad timing. It didn't add anything to the GTA franchise after something as amazing as GTA 4 took the spotlight. The protagonist is a shallow husk of a character, and the gameplay is rather outdated and clunky. Not to mention, it's probably one of the ugliest Grand Theft Auto games by far. The graphics in general look like something a kid in Game Maker Studio could make. The cutscenes are all very clearly drawn in Flash and are at times just hideous. Overall, avoid this one, unless you're really interested. Funny enough, while Max Payne 3 is one of my favorite games ever, the older Max Paynes just aren't too interesting to me. Max Payne 2 has an awesome physics and combat system, I'll give it that, and there are some really cool The Matrix-style moments to be had in this game, but once you get kind of accustomed to that, and aren't really too impressed by it anymore, the story is laughably cheesy and, dare I say, retarded, and I was checked out from a very early point in the story. It's hard to rank this game, because I think it's all good and fun, and I kinda actually recommend it, but it isn't necessarily better than the other games on this list. A lackluster story and some hair-pullingly annoying bugs aside, Max Payne 2 really only has its fun combat system to offer you. We are now getting to the blatantly mediocre titles, and it's only going to get worse. I do not like Red Dead Revolver, and I might actually even say it's one of Rockstar's least interesting games. It's a real clunky, boring experience that offered nothing to me at all. Its combat system is clunky, simple, and repetitive, and that one thing really makes this game a chore because that's such a large part of the game. If you want a better Western game on the PS2, check out Gun, which oddly enough delivers far more of an authentic Red Dead Redemption style experience to the PS2 than Red Dead Revolver did. I beat this game with my brother when I was a kid, so I'll always treasure this game for that memory alone, but I don't really rate games by how nostalgic they are, and honestly, this game isn't anything too fantastic or original looking back. It's definitely one of the more forgettable Rockstar games, and I don't think it's bad by any means. It's really just a bare-bones third-person fighting game when you break it down. I also really don't care for the Warriors film, so I especially didn't give a shit about this game's story. But I know some people really do like this game, and I respect their opinion, because it is a classic Rockstar game, and a lot of people do like it. What reason could one possibly have in 2020 to play GTA 3? It's easily one of Rockstar's most empty husks of a game, and it's simply a product of its time. The protagonist doesn't speak at all, which completely removes any incentive to care about the story whatsoever. The graphics are worse than some Game Maker Studio college projects, and you can't even swim in this fucking game. Not to mention, the whole game is just a clunky shell of its successors. I do not recommend this game, honestly, at all. I have zero interest in this game. I've beaten it twice and was pretty unimpressed both times playing it, but that could just be because I played it a couple years ago, and it did come out a really long time ago, so it's not going to impress me, obviously. The physics system in this game is so old that the combat really lacks any of the sophistication that makes Max Payne 2 and 3 so great, and the story is comical, like, literally it's a comic book. It's not interesting to me at all. Keep in mind, I'm not trying to shit on all these old games, but I feel like people use nostalgia too much as a way to excuse the flaws of these games. Max Payne 1 may have been revolutionary for its time, but it's absolutely nothing compared to its far more enjoyable successors. A pretty neat little N64 game. I was actually heavily surprised when playing this. I started playing it a few days ago, by the way. It's kind of like if Grand Theft Auto and Metroid Prime had an awesome fuck baby. You pretty much just drive around a decently impressive and large world and shoot aliens to death. It's an interesting challenge, and if you happen to see a physical copy of this game anywhere, I'd heavily recommend picking it up. You may be surprised at its quality. Smuggler's Run was a PS2 launch title, and it was pretty good for the time. I mean, it did come out in 2000, so it's kind of hard to fault it for its technical flaws. It's essentially just a car combat game where you smuggle shit around the map. I don't know how else to explain it. It's a very dated game. It offers really nothing to the table, and honestly, if you really are itching for a car combat game on the PS2, Twisted Metal Black is your guy, not this game. What a disappointing piece of shit this game was. I made a whole video the other day discussing why this game was a massive disappointment, but I'll just quickly brief you on why it sucks so bad. It took all of the challenge and nuance of Manhunt 1 and turned it into a cheap whore. It's a boring third-person shooter that can be completed on the hardest difficulty in like 4 hours. They also made the focus of this game the story, unlike the first game, which focused on amazing gameplay. And the story is a fucking mess from start to finish. It's just utter gibberish, it makes no sense, the characters are thin as tissue. Overall, I'd recommend playing through this game just because it is a Manhunt title, but know that it is far less quality than the first game, which I actually consider to be a masterpiece. State of Emergency is Rockstar's worst IP, easily. You play as this mass shooter, I guess, and you run around, like, the mall, killing other mass shooters. It's a very generic shooter slash beat-em-up experience. I didn't beat this one, because I found it so uninteresting, that's why I don't know a ton about it, but imagine the clunky combat of the early GTAs on PS2, and imagine if there was an entire game that was just linearly centered around that combat system. That's pretty much all this game is, from start to finish. I would call this shovelware. It's the sequel absolutely no one asked for. State of Emergency 2 is fucking awful, and I'd go as far as to say it's the worst Rockstar game on PS2. It's everything State of Emergency 1 was, but worse, far glitchier, far uglier somehow, and even less playable. I wish I had the energy to go on about this title, but just please trust me when I say it's completely lackluster in every single way. An unfortunate time capsule of the late 90s, there is absolutely no reason to play GTA 2 in 2020. Its story is absurd and all over the place and not taken seriously, its gameplay is 20 years out of date and extremely clunky. What more is there to say? It's the second GTA game ever, it's not gonna be great, and that's fine, I'll forgive it. Grand Theft Auto 1 feels like a game that came out on another planet. It is so unbelievably clunky, outdated, and butt-fucking ugly that it is just a frustrating as hell experience from beginning to end. Only the most die-hard of GTA fans would enjoy this experience. The Italian Job is a very strange video game, and it's not that it's bad or anything, but it's gonna be low on this list because it's made by Rockstar Games, and that puts this game so far down on the food chain of quality Rockstar games. The game's essentially like Mafia meets Driver. I beat this one a few months ago because I was really curious, and it's fun, but it's nothing I'd explicitly recommend, and there's a reason it's been completely forgotten by most everyone. It's also a movie-licensed game, so, Oni is a very obscure and experimental beat-em-up title from Rockstar, and while it's objectively not, like, horrible or anything, it's mediocre at best. I noticed it actually shares quite a few animations with Manhunt, and it did come out a few years before Manhunt, so that leads me to believe that this game's entire purpose was really just a test for Manhunt. It has a pretty fun combat system, and that's literally the only thing about this game worth a damn. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you one of the worst standalone Grand Theft Auto games in the entire franchise. Grand Theft Auto Advanced was lame. Like, really, really lame. It was a nauseating, confusing mess from start to finish. The dialogue is fucking stupid and not worth your time at all. The frame rate sucks, it makes the game a genuinely nauseating experience. I'm not joking, I almost threw up playing through this. It also lacks replay value. I mean, there's no reason to explore the quote-unquote city. It's really just a bunch of shitty assets. There's nothing even really to do in this game but shoot people and get into really predictable, unfun, hard-to-control gunfights with cops. The missions are also uninteresting and add nothing to this game. I would give this maybe like, I don't know, a 3 out of 10. This game... I don't know. I didn't beat it. I didn't even get very far. What the hell's even going on here? Am I on Mars? This is a very ugly, strange, hard-to-control title from Rockstar Games, and I'm gonna go ahead and assume this was just a test. Another game I couldn't finish no matter how hard I tried because it's just an ugly hunk of shit. The frame rate is also like 15 frames per second, so that's totally disgusting. Not sure what kind of crack Rockstar was smoking when they made this one, but I've played crappy shovelware iOS games that are funner and more functional. Ladies and gentlemen, Evel Knievel. What a way Rockstar has come. This is one of the worst games I've ever played, probably. I know a lot of people jokingly say that on YouTube, but this is genuinely one of the most uncomfortable, ugly experiences one can have in a video game. I mean, just fucking look at it. I genuinely believe that only a few hundred people have ever played this game, like ever. I'm not even joking. Lastly on my list is the Game Boy Color port of GTA 1. If you thought GTA 1 was bad, try playing it with tissue over your eyes. That is really what Grand Theft Auto for the Game Boy Color feels like when you play it. I've had funner gaming experiences on a fucking TI-82 calculator. That is not a joke. Anyway, thanks for watching. I know I did miss a few titles, but like I said, I didn't play those specifically, so I didn't want to talk about games I've never played. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Peace out.